Hello, everyone. Thanks for giving us your time today for VR Download. I'm Ian Hamilton in New York, joined by David Heaney from London as we discuss the next steps in personal computing. We're in Quest 3 headsets today with last generation Meta avatars. I've got hand tracking here with built-in microphones. I want to say thank you personally to our patrons out there. There's a couple more on our list for us to talk about today. So thank you to our patrons for supporting the work we do over on UploadVR.com. That's XR Developer News, Podum, the developer of Smash Drums, Holonet, Mike Manzano, Richard Miller, Parmesan, and Qubits. David, what do we have today?
Hello, everyone. So first, I see in the comments John Birkbeck, a YouTube member, saying that they appreciate the recommendation from me to use the Logitech MX Ink tracked stylus as a kind of third tracking device on Quest. And John says he's using it for a new project. Kind of mysterious there. Let us know if you're allowed to say what you're working on. We'd love to know that. That sounds very interesting. So today we have a total of 8 topics. Firstly, we'll just briefly discuss the Nintendo Switch 2, because how could we not on the week of its announcement? So we'll basically discuss, will this thing ever get VR? Might Labo VR come over in some way? And we've noted on UploadVR.com that Labo VR is the only game that Nintendo lists that will just not be supported on Switch 2. So then we'll discuss afterwards Bigscreen Beyond 2. We talked last week about its initial sales velocity. Now it's really keeping going. They now say that they have sold more Beyond 2 headsets already than they sold the original in its first year. And it's only been 2 weeks. So in 2 weeks of the new one, they've done the equivalent of 1 year for the previous headset. That is very fascinating. We'll then talk about Microsoft Flight Simulator 2024 getting foveated rendering. Right now in the beta channel of that sim, there is fixed foveated rendering, and they will be adding eye-tracked foveated rendering sometime later in the beta cycle. And that's really important for PC VR users, and we'll dig into that when we talk about it. Then we'll have a brief Apple section. We'll discuss the release of visionOS 2.4, which brings Apple Intelligence, the Spatial Gallery platform, and iPhone integration. And we will also discuss Virtual Desktop's new macOS update, which is smoother on Quest than Apple's Mac Virtual Display is on Vision Pro. Smoother is a very specific word we're using here, and we'll get into why we're using that exact word. We'll then quickly note that Meta is now the official UFC technology partner, including for VR. We'll have an article about this later today. They basically said that does include Quest, so we expect to see, 180 degree, maybe even 180 degree 3D streams of UFC fights on Quest headsets. That's something we could see. We'll then discuss Bloomberg's report seemingly revealing the rough price, features, and input device of Meta's HUD glasses set to launch later this year. So that's something that's somewhere between the Ray-Ban Meta glasses and the full AR glasses, a middle ground device that Meta plans to launch before they go all the way to full AR. And then finally, we will discuss a topic that verges into areas that we rarely truly deeply discuss and may get a little bit controversial, but it's important because the implications for our industry could be enormous, which is whether Trump's new tariffs set to kick in next week, if they do kick in, could drive up the price of headsets in the US. And that would have profound implications for our entire industry.
Yeah, I expect it to be a very active show in our comments today, and we'll, as always, bring up interesting comments and questions. I want to say hello to everyone globally and hopefully out there in space one day. Hopefully the astronauts and their VR headsets are watching us one day, right? We can get there. Hello to Guy Godin out there in the comments, and I want to specifically mention the Antarctic viewer that we had recently. If you're out there watching, thank you for tuning in, and then Geek Odin Creator Virtual Desktop. I see someone telling us that they're in New Jersey, and I see Western Canada out there, and I appreciate the psycho joke saying rain-soaked New Jersey. Ian, you can find that just west of Staten Island. In fairness, I want to go north of New York, right? I want to go see what the Eastern Seaboard looks like all the way to Maine, right? But I've not been north of the Bronx yet. So like, I mean, I'm sorry. I would like to see all this stuff. So I appreciate, any geography lessons you can provide in our comments will help the poor Americans among us, David, to have a better understanding of the world. Yeah, and let's move through this show as quickly as we can. This first one is feels like you've given me space right at the top of the show for us to talk about this, David. I appreciate that. Why don't we get into it?
I wonder what you could mention on this topic. Yeah, so if you've been living under a rock this week, you wouldn't know that the Switch 2 pricing has been revealed, including the games like Mario Kart World. So right now, that could be affected by tariffs too, as we'll discuss later in the show. The console will be $450 or $500 in a bundle that comes with the new Mario Kart World. And it looks like a really interesting console, and I'm sure it'll be a great Christmas present for kids this year and adults alike to themselves. But the relevance for us here is that Nintendo has basically said that while there are some Switch 1 games that have compatibility issues with Switch 2, those are all being investigated and will probably be worked out. But the one game that they have listed, that they say just flat out is not compatible with Switch 2 is Nintendo Labo VR. And the reason for that is quite obvious. It physically doesn't fit in, right? It's a different dimension device. It's a bigger and heavier console than the Switch one. So if they wanted to do this, they would have to kind of make a new one that was scaled up for the size, and they don't seem interested in that. If you don't know what we're even talking about here, and you've never heard of this, and you're saying, what the hell is Nintendo Labo VR? Back in 2019, Nintendo released this thing. It's a cardboard shell with some Fresnel lenses for the Switch console, as well as these 5 different accessories that you can assemble with literal cardboard, and then have these kind of interactive experiences. And while on a technical objective level, Nintendo Labo VR was awful, right? It's a 720p display, so you're getting like less than 640 by 720 per eye. That's lower than pretty much any headset you will have ever tried, unless you were here in the industry 15 years ago. That's 60 hertz full persistence as well. So you've got, motion blur and everything. All of that said, the actual gameplay they had here and the fact that you assembled these things and had these physical controllers was very innovative and fun for kids, right? It was a great way to affordably give your kids a couple of hours of fun. And some of the stuff they did here was really innovative, right? Like this one here, the elephant one. A lot of people don't realize, while this headset is always 3DoF, right? It's just rotation tracking. This was 6DoF controller tracking. So if you look closer here, these are like luminous paint dots. And here at the kind of trunk, you put in the right Joy-Con that has a little IR camera. And they use that little IR camera to track this as the controller moves and then give you a 6DoF experience that was used in some games and even this kind of like sculpting creativity app. So really innovative stuff, terrible technically, won't work with the Switch 2. The question is, will they come out with any kind of VR for Switch 2 over its lifetime? Could it be a new Labo that's the same concept over again, right? Remember, this thing doesn't even have straps. You just hold it up to your head and have a little bit of fun with it for short durations. Or will they come out with some sort of proper VR headset for the Switch 2? I should note also on this thing, you could play Breath of the Wild in its entirety. It was terrible and universally panned as like, why on earth did they do this? Because the resolution, not only of the headset, but of the rendering was so low to make this work that it was basically like people put it on and went, is this broken? Is there something working? Is there a glitch here? But no, that's just how it was. But yeah, so I guess if they are going to make a headset for Switch 2, I seriously doubt it's still this slotting in thing, because not only would the resolution be comical by today's standards, but it's so big and heavy compared to the original Switch. You're adding 100 or 200 grams plus bigger size, that it's just not practical. I think if they're going to do a headset for this, and I don't think they are anytime soon for what it's worth, but if they were going to, it would either be a PlayStation VR2 style thing that you plug into the Switch dock, or it would be some sort of wireless system that you connect to the Switch. But I don't think they're going to do either for what it's worth.
So it sounds like Arlen out there, regular viewer in our comments, is tuning into us at chipmunk speed to catch up and time travel to catch up to the present. So good luck to you on your journey as you catch up to us. And I'm seeing Memphis, Tennessee from CJ out there, and oh goodness, so many things to say on these, and I'm refusing to say the word today. I'm going to make you say the word. So you asked this core question of what would a Labo 2 look like, and I got to mention Jerry Ellsworth and Tilt 5. I would love to see the Tilt 5 glasses plug into the top of the Switch too, where there's that USB C port, and then I would love an assortment of Labo 2 accessories with featuring the retroreflective material on the glasses in really wild configurations. I don't know if they could even get it on a fold-up cardboard box or not, but I could still see them doing really magical things with that kind of setup, right? With this kind of ingenuity attached to just these simplistic tracking mechanisms, right? Like each of these is like you're using 3DOF on one specific axes in a really brilliant way, and it was fantastic to see. I would love to see a new version of that, yeah. But that the top USB-C port that is there on the Switch 2 looks really really interesting to me. I noticed on the they said there's 3 modes for it: handheld, tabletop, and TV. And tabletop is the one where uh, Tilt 5 is already playing, right? Like it's already there. It's already performing on current gen hardware. They had a version running. I once saw a version running of Tilt 5. I think it was on a phone, and they walked me from one station to another station, and these things appeared on the table. It just Come on, Jerry. Make it happen. I believe in you, Jerry. We all believe in you. We believe. I see the overlap. Like we all see the overlap. Nintendo. I believe in you. Come on, let's make this happen. Let's get that. The Nintendo Labo 2 should be an AR kit, not a VR kit. Would be my argument here. And as absurd as that is to say on the VR show, as the captain of the VR industry, from the way I defend the uses of VR, right? Like I defend the uses of VR all day long. Like nothing will ever go away. But this is the Tilt 5 AR device is the one device that starts to give you the field of view that we get out of VR headsets today at prices that are reasonable scale. And I want these two ideas to meet up.
Yeah, it would be a very interesting partnership. I think we did discuss before that if someone was going to acquire Till 5 someday, it kind of would make more sense for Nintendo to do that, right? I still think on a practicality level and a cost level, it seems possible, but unlikely. I still think the way that Nintendo gets into VR, in my view, is on the software level. If you look at the fact that Apple partnered with Nintendo a few years ago to build iPhone games, and these were all built around touch, and they were using Nintendo's IPs, you could see Apple or Meta contracting Nintendo to go and build games for visionOS or Meta Horizon OS on Quest headsets, or even maybe Google contracting them for Android XR, and that being the way that these IPs come. I just don't see the Switch 2 hardware meaning much, right? You kind of like it's roughly as powerful as a Quest 3 anyway, roughly, before we get into technical debates there. It's not going to dramatically be any different than what you get from a standalone headset. But again, I would love to see this. I think it would be an interesting partnership.
So we have yet to experience these things, right? We have yet to experience holding a Switch 2 in our hands, a Steam Deck in our hands, a Switch 1 in our hands, and you're looking at it in pass through with this crappy screen, right? And the image on the device, the gaming device in your hand, warps. It just like sucks out of the screen into the open air around you and becomes this giant 4K whatever virtual screen, super wide, whatever you want, right? It doesn't matter once you're in the VR headset what dimensions. It's the game that actually tells you what dimensions. You and the game team up to tell you what dimensions this game should be played at on a particular day. And like that that's available to us. We can do that. But we have yet to even experience this little warping thing of the screen coming out of mixed reality into VR, uh, because of all the software things that are still getting developed. But the moment that happens, like, even that alone is going to be a really, really great use of things like the Switch 2 in VR.
Yeah, no, I agree that like the real direct near-term relevance is, as you say, using if it does support a USB-C display out, and I'm sure people will, just as they did with the Switch One, find ways to kind of hack around needing the dock for that, and then you can easily just plug in a lightweight pair of, VR glasses or a full-scale VR headset and magnify that display up to a giant virtual display. You say we've yet to experience that. The only part we've yet to experience is the cool transition of warping. You can do this today, right? You can do this with an X-Rail. You can do this through Steam Link on your Steam Deck with Apple Vision Pro. I've done it, and it's great, and I do think that's the more direct relevance. One comment here from James O'Loughlin saying Apple doesn't contract third-party developers unless it's for Apple Arcade. Yeah, I'm suggesting it would be for Apple Arcade, right? They've done this on Vision Pro, Resolution Games, Gears and Goo. They literally did it with Nintendo for the iPhone, right? It's not hypothetical, so they could just do it iPhone Vision Pro.
Yeah, well, again, I'm going to talk about my dream here, and it's Super Mario Brothers 3 or Sonic the Hedgehog 2. Those two games that just you played on every system imaginable. But in a VR headset, they've either open source or some platform partnership has made it possible to see the entire first level of these games or the entire level represented in just a gigantic scale, 10,000 pixels wide, 15,000 pixels wide, full level of the first level of these games. And you just follow your character making the journey all the way across the landscape right in front of you. Like, how do we get that on Apple Arcade is the ultimate question to me. I don't see how that happens, but I would love it.
Yeah, I mean, I think we will see games like that on Apple Arcade, but I don't think they'll necessarily be the big major IPs. I already think there are some games on Vision Pro that do this, and if you're using the Mac ultra wide mode through Vision Pro, there are a bunch of PC games that support ultra wide monitors, and they will scale all the way up. You've done it yourself with Stardew Valley. When we see Apple Arcade do that, it's just a matter of when there's enough vision out there that it makes sense for Apple.
Good point. Yeah, let's move on.
Yeah, let's move on to the next topic. It's something that we've kind of been following each week now, I guess, is just the scale of Bigscreen beyond 2 pre-orders. This is almost going to be a broken record thing, but this thing is really selling fast. As I said in the intro, they have now sold more Beyond 2s in 2 weeks, or should I say Beyond 2 pre-orders, than they have Beyond 1 in the first year. So Beyond 2 has been on the market for 2 years. Sorry, Beyond 1 has been on the market for 2 years. In that first year, they sold as many as they've sold Beyond 2 now in 2 weeks. So that's a really impressive sales velocity. After just 1 day, they had already sold more Beyond 2s than Beyond 1 did in its first 6 months. So you see the kind of pace of orders there. What the first day is kind of half of them, and then half of the first year. They said on that day that represented 10 times as many units. So just like last year, we got to put this into context. We estimate that there are probably a few tens of thousands of Beyond 1 headsets out there. On the Steam hardware survey, it is around 0.5% of Steam VR use. So about 1 in 200 VR headsets on Steam are Beyond 1. So what might we see Beyond 2 get to? We're going to track that really carefully, but I think, we could maybe see it get to, single digit percent, right? Where it's, 3%, 4%, 5%. It starts to be 1 in 20 rather than 1 in 200. But that will be over time, right? We're going to look at this thing on the scale of months, not on the scale of weeks. And they need to ship these orders out, right? The first batches are April and May, respectively, for Beyond 2 and Beyond 2E. And now new orders of each are shipping in June. But of course, as we will discuss at the end of the show, all of this could be thrown into haywire by the coming tariffs if they do apply. Bigscreen will not be immune to this for reasons that we will get into. So this is going to, I really can't stress how important this last topic of the show is going to be and how it could overshadow almost everything we're discussing.
Yeah, I'm looking at everyone excited about Wanderer out there. It looks like it's going to launch here at the top of the hour. So we have a graphics comparison ready to go for that, but we don't have a review. It'll be a couple days for us to get our review out there. And do let us know when that game is available, actually to download. There were a couple, I think, delays there that, the anticipation is very, very, very high. So just would love to see it confirmed that it's actually available, and then look for our graphics comparison between Quest and PSVR 2 over on our channel and on the website. And yeah, we will talk about the tariffs when we get to it and how big that is. I Yeah, there's a lot of concern today for that announcement with this product in particular, with VR headsets in general and just how it affects the market. I I don't know if now or later is the debate to have where at the same time that this is happening, right? VR is still getting better with each generation and unlocking, like the software is becoming more usable to make it possible for you to do more things with your VR headset with just, I mean, even Guy Godin in our audience, right? Like he's making strides month to month on virtual desktop to enable you to do more things with your VR headset. And like that's also playing a factor with prices if prices go up. So like I just want to note that like it's a very complicated thing to think about, you know, our capabilities being unlocked at the same time prices might be going haywire.
For sure. Let's talk about Flight Simulator 2024. So, this will become the second major PC sim to get built in support for foveated rendering. So, not hacking it in third party tools, built in support from the developers. So, right now, in the beta build of Flight Simulator 2024, you have this foveated rendering setting, and right now it enables fixed foveated rendering. And if you're not familiar with what that means, it refers to when the center area of the lens, of each lens, is rendered at full resolution, and then the edge areas, the peripheral areas, are rendered at low resolution. And so this works on any headset, even without eye tracking, with the disadvantage being that if you look to the periphery of the lens, you will see some pixelation. So that's the disadvantage here, but it works on any headset. And so what they're hoping to add pretty soon, likely by the end of the beta cycle, is eye-tracked foveated rendering. And this is coming through OpenXR 1.1's support for this. So in the past, if companies wanted to do this before this was part of the OpenXR spec, they would have to either use the OpenXR extension, which not all headsets supported, or before even that was a thing, they would have to use these independent headset APIs like the Vive Pro Eye or Meta's Quest Pro APIs that weren't even available on PC for a very, very long time. All of this complexity had to be kind of sorted. Now that we live in a world where, as we talked about last year, OpenXR 1.1 has merged the Quad Views OpenXR extension that Vario pioneered into the spec, companies can support this with the knowledge that any headset that provides its eye tracking to OpenXR will work with it. So when this does activate this eye tracked foveated rendering, you should be able to get significant performance benefits. So for that fixed foveated rendering, you're talking 5 to 10 frames per second better in Flight Simulator from my testing. But if we look at DCS as an example, and DCS already has eye tracked foveated rendering through OpenXR, you're talking dozens in the best case scenario of extra frames per second. And if your eye tracking latency is low enough, as most of the systems out there are, you shouldn't even notice a difference. And that's really significant because to run these kind of sims at decent resolution, these are heavy simulators that are taxing even out of VR. But once you're doing VR with a relatively wide field of view that's seeing a lot of the environment, you're trying to push, 72, 80, 90, 120 frames per second. You need really high resolution to see all the cockpit elements. This stuff is really taxing. And so this is going to be a game saver, a game changer, and a kind of real important boost to people who have eye tracked headsets. So because this is through OpenXR, that will include Quest Pro on virtual desktops, VDXR. system, through Quest Link, if you have the developer mode enabled, through Steam Link, because they recently now pass OpenXR eye tracking. This also will include things like the upcoming Bigscreen Beyond 2E, Vario Aero and Vario XR4, Pimax Crystal and Pimax Crystal Super, Somnium VR1 eye tracking models, all of these headsets. Unfortunately, if you're someone out there that just has a Quest 2 or a Quest 3 or a 3S, that's not going to be something that you get access to because you don't have eye tracking. But just to really quickly clarify, if anyone is kind of wondering, what's the advantage of this? By rendering that lower resolution, you save performance. And if you're not meeting frame rate, that performance can help you get closer to frame rate. And even if you already were meeting frame rate, what you can do is use that extra performance to boost up the quality of the resolution. So this is really promising to see eye tracking, foveated rendering arrive in these sims. It should soon, hopefully, be an expected feature for any PC sim that supports VR to have foveated rendering. And I think still it is a very small percentage of Steam VR headsets that actually do support eye tracking. So it's not going to be the biggest priority in the world for these sims right now. But once we see, hopefully next year, a Quest 4 arrive with eye tracking, that's when you might see pretty much every sim implement this.
Seeing Gamertag VR out there in the comments talking about not minding a wire, and I totally understand and agree with it in so many contexts, but there's just a few where I don't, and those few sort of like break it for me sometimes. Like it's so complicated. I did this experiment recently with Apple Vision Pro and Quest headsets, and the Apple Vision Pro has the wire, right, going between the battery and the headset. And I also had a Quest that I ended up putting in the same configuration with the battery basically in a sling, same configuration, but to give the Quest 3 enough power. And we were going back and forth between different games, and like a game that's built for hand tracking first, or something that's not going to have your hands moving really, really fast, you don't notice this. But suddenly, my kid was in that configuration with the sling for battery, and they were playing Beat Saber and immediately hit the chord playing Beat Saber. And it's one of those things you only notice like after 15 hours of use in the right piece of software. And like, I don't know, I still show up to events, Gamertag, where I get the sense that people I talk to don't use headsets as long as we do, and I am sure you get that sense too. And it's just these things we notice after 30 hours, and it's like, oh, you made the headset for work, but I love it so much for work, I now want to go take it for my personal life. Or I love it so much in my personal life, now I want to take it to work. And you didn't really have the whole person in mind when you made the device.
A few comments here. So Gamertag also said that it's notable that PlayStation VR 2 was ahead of the game here with having eye-tracked foveated rendering from its launch in 2023 on PlayStation 5, yes, and that's how some of the biggest titles were able to come to PSVR 2, right? Gran Turismo 7, Horizon Call of the Mountain, Resident Evil 8, all of these blockbuster titles leverage eye-tracked foveated rendering on PS5 and PS5 Pro with your PlayStation VR 2 to make their graphical fidelity possible. And that's kind of the advantage there of when you have a console system where everyone is using the same headset. Every headset has eye tracking, right? Because they're all PlayStation VR 2, and you have this unified SDK from the beginning. And then PC is obviously a lot more fragmented, so we're seeing it slow. And of course, ironically, we need to bring up that while PlayStation VR 2 does work on PC these days, it doesn't support eye tracking there. So this is one of those cases where as these sims are adding eye tracking, PSVR 2 on PC owners are going to be more and more frustrated with Sony and really hoping that Sony does someday bring eye tracking to PC, or more likely, in my opinion, that some hackers and firmware engineers will figure out how to get it working without Sony's consent. So another notable thing, of course, is that Apple Vision Pro eye tracking can't be used on PC. So you do have ALVR for Vision Pro, and we'll talk soon about how virtual desktop is in the works for Apple Vision Pro. However, none of these apps can access the eye tracking, so you cannot get foveated rendering from either PSVR 2 on PC or Apple Vision Pro on PC. So that is just kind of a really frustrating situation to be in.
Yeah, so the commentary on just how do you get eye tracking, like how do you get the area that the person is looking at this exact moment where their fovea is focused on that beautiful graphic. What was that graphic from, by the way? Was that from Flight Sim, or did you make that one? Because I'm
I
curious about
made
the
that one.
bottom area of the.
So this is fixed foveated rendering. This isn't eye track
Oh,
foveated rendering.
okay,
This is
okay.
fixed.
Got it. All right. Yeah. So sorry. It was interesting. I'm curious. So you're looking at different areas of the screen, and it has to pick that area of the screen. So you're looking at this area of the screen, right? And it picks this area that it's going to send through the whole track render display pipeline, right? It's got to track your head movement. It's got to render it in the system, and then it's got to display it back to your eyes. Um, how do you get it all the way from your eyeball, where your eyeball is pointed, to like a PC over there in the corner, and to the lighthouse base stations up there in the corner of a room? How do you get all of this tracking data from all these different sources to reliably get you to 90 frames per second, the minimum sort of bar for comfort that most of these companies have arrived at, which is like all these tricks to get us to 90 frames per second, 50, 45 frames per second, lower cost hardware. 90 frames per second is still like this gold standard that most people try to get to. And yeah, so here's the foveal region. This is where your eyes are pointed to at any particular region. It gets rendered in higher resolution. Everything else around it, the peripheral region, gets rendered in lower resolution. But my point is on explaining to VR that people don't understand. Headsets everywhere, every VR in the world, even caves that don't use headsets, they track your head movements, then they render a scene for your head position, and then they display that for you. But you can take all three of those tasks and put them in different places around your room in different configurations and strap weird things to your body to get different sorts of situations. But it's all the same thing. Bigscreen Beyond is an amazing expression of where they've externalized everything except the display, right? Um, but when you add this layer to it, you add what Gamertag is talking about with the preference of the wire, right? The wire helps you send some of this foveal data directly to the rendering engine in some certain configurations a little bit quicker, doesn't it?
So let's kind of separate terms here. So ignore the tracking because that's not really relevant here for what we're talking about. So this would work in 3DOF. Eye tracked foveated rendering would work even if you didn't have any headset positional tracking. The difficulty here is just that the eye tracking hardware, the little cameras that are inside the headset pointed at your eyes, are tracking your pupils at a low enough latency, because you need to make sure that when each frame starts to be rendered, your eye position hasn't moved too much by the time it finishes rendering. So it is a good point to say that, yes, when it comes to headset tracking, there are a lot of tricks that are used. So when a frame begins being rendered, it is where your head position was at that time, plus a little bit of prediction about where your head is moving based on where it's currently moving. But if your head is moved in a way where you've changed acceleration into a different direction, how do you account for that? Well, what systems use is reprojection. So they skew your position rotationally. That's kind of what we call time warp, or just whatever, rotational reprojection in the direction that you've moved since the frame started to be rendered. But you can't really do that trick for eye tracking because you're starting a frame, you're rendering this part low resolution. What happens if it moves? The reality here is that the solution is just brute force. These eye tracking systems are usually running at 120 hertz, some of them higher to 144, 240. And you kind of just have to hope that it hasn't moved too much relative to that. And essentially, the higher the latency of the eye tracking system, the larger you have to make the foveal region, because it's okay if your eye did dart from here to here, but not if your eye darted from here to here in the time since the frame started to be rendered and when it gets displayed on the headset. So all of these systems are doing 120 hertz at minimum is the real answer here, and some of them are even doing 240. But as Guy Godin has pointed out in the comments, an issue there can be if you're doing wireless streamed PC VR using compression streaming, sometimes that latency, it will be slightly too high. But what some of the kind of experimental systems do is that they send the eye tracking data separately to the kind of frame data. But even then, that's not going to help because there's still going to be a latency to when you're actually moving your head. So that is kind of a good example of why, if you are using eye-tracked foveated rendering, you'll want to be going to 120 hertz if you can, and ideally, yes, you will have either a wired system or a lossless compression wireless system like the Vive wireless adapter. But I've tried foveated rendering with Quest Pro in apps before. We covered a few years ago how OpenXR Toolkit was a third-party tool that let you inject this into games like the original Flight Simulator. I used it and it was good enough, right? For me, I didn't actually perceive the difference there. It seemed to work well enough. So, I mean, the reality is also that the advantage of having to render less pixels is that you can render each frame in less time, right? Fewer milliseconds. So you get a higher frame rate in the first place, which actually brings down latency. So sometimes it just kind of works out.
So Luggy out there asking a good question, and so don't feel embarrassed to ask basic questions about VR and how it works. We're an inviting group in here, and lots of helpful people in our audience to help those newbies understand the basics of VR and how it works. I'm gonna have to go and give an aside here to make a space for that question, because I'm sending off a Steam Deck to my kid soon. And I wanted my kid to understand the difference between a Steam Deck and a Switch. And the thing about it was, the kid, my teen here, understood and had a fan, like had someone that they watch on stream, who played PC games. And they understood PC games. They only heard the word PC, right? Like they heard, I'm playing this on PC on some stream. And I came and said, I'm going to send you a Steam Deck. And they're like, well, what kind of games does that play? And I sent them the list of all the Steam Deck verified games. And their eyes got wide, right? Like, whoa, that's actually a big list. Like they didn't realize that the list of Steam Deck verified games is larger than the list of games that are available on the Nintendo Switch platform, right? Even though we all, as like embedded in this industry, know that the it's even bigger than that, right? It's so much bigger than what is on Steam Deck verified. But you don't have this mindset of this new viewer of like, how do I get this? I really want Microsoft Flight Simulator, and I want to train like I'm a pilot. I don't care about anything else, David, right? Like I just want that experience. How do I do it? And that's what that question out there was asking. So I'm wondering if you could help them.
Sure. So yeah, there's two components to that question, right? There's can I play Microsoft Flight Simulator with my Quest 3? And then there's the controllers or gaming controller part. So to play Flight Simulator in VR, you need a gaming PC, and then you need to use with your Quest 3 either Steam Link, Virtual Desktop, or Quest Link. So you do need a very powerful gaming PC in the first place. But assuming you already know that, yes, you can use your Quest 3 controllers, and they've implemented a system where you can, physically interact with cockpit controls by using your controllers to kind of point and click on cockpit elements. Then you can grab the yoke and move it around like this. However, I don't think that's the ideal way to play. Well, if you want to be serious about this, and maybe you don't, maybe you just want to play around, you'll want to get like a physical flight stick, either a yoke or just a regular HOTAS, and use that. That's the best way to play. You can also use the Xbox controller if you want. You can use an Xbox One controller. There are many ways to play Flight Simulator. Now, the next thing I'll say is, if you don't want to play in VR, if you just want to play on a giant virtual flat screen, you don't need a PC at all. You can use Xbox Cloud Streaming, which is on Quest, alongside an Xbox controller, which it doesn't even have to be an official Xbox controller. You can get a cheap one on Amazon for like $15 and connect it via Bluetooth to your Quest headset. But again, if you want to play in VR, you will need a very powerful gaming PC. Relevant to this discussion, Quest 3 doesn't have eye tracking, so you can't take advantage of the coming eye track foveated rendering. You're just going to get this kind of traditional fixed foveated rendering. And I saw a comment earlier asking, with fixed foveated rendering, does it really matter that the edges of the lens, the periphery, is in low resolution since it's distorted anyway? And I think that question to me betrays that you don't have a pancake lens headset, because I agree with you. On Fresnel lenses, a lot of them, you're not going to actually already have the optical quality in the periphery for this to much matter. And that's why I've argued before that fixed foveated rendering was a great idea for Quest 2, Quest 1, Quest 3S even. If you have a pancake lens headset like Pico 4, Pico 4 Ultra, or Quest 3 or Quest Pro, it actually is clear and sharp on the edges. So you do notice fixed foveated rendering. So it's going to really depend on what headset you have there.
Siegfried out there saying, I'm wanting to get into car racing, sim VR. Still not sure on what hardware to get, but I already have a VR gaming PC and a Quest 3, so still looking into it. Yeah, we were discussing this, and this is an active thing. We're gonna have to move through this show, but the next part of this is Apple, and there's big advances in the Apple section here, towards what we're expecting, which is later this year when they go to WWDC and we see the next phase of the software platform that they're building out here. And they've gotten the low hanging fruit. Like, you got your Mac into VR, you got your iPhone into VR, you got your keyboard, your mouse in certain instances. But that's just the beginning of what they can do with this platform. And we expect to see that very, very soon. And it relates to some of these questions in the audience. So all of you that are sort of biding your time and waiting to get the right piece of hardware, I understand it, because like, we need Google to have auto recognition of a lot of these objects. We need Meta to have it as well. And we need Apple to have it in order for the questions you're asking to be more usable. So I'm in the same boat. I'm looking for a good flight stick. I'm looking for a good racing wheel. It's the last piece I need, I think, for my array of home simulation here. I've got every other tool at my disposal. If I want to fly a plane, drive a car, shoot a gun, pull back a bow and arrow, I've got the entire armory around me of tools available. And, I get it. So we're all on the same path here of wanting to have all of those devices, but none of us want to pull the trigger and buy the thing before it's time. And we're not saying it's time yet, right? Like, that's part of this.
Yeah, I think a lot of people underestimate just how difficult it is to run these heavy PC sims at an acceptable frame rate and resolution in VR. Like, it's true, yes, that if you want to get into PC VR, you can theoretically buy $1,000 PC and do it. And you can go and play games like Half-Life Alyx, you can play, Metro, you can play Alien, you can play Behemoth, these kind of big games that are already on Quest. But when it comes to these sims, be it like Elite Dangerous, DCS, Flight Simulator, you're going to need like a $3,000, $4,000 PC to really run it at a level where you're not putting every setting to low and kind of using all the kind of reprojection in the world. It is really demanding, and that's why it is so exciting to see eye-tracked foveated rendering finally come here. So one small note here, the same commenter who said that, pancake lenses, they're saying pancake lenses still have chromatic aberration and blur at the edge of the lens, and that's very true in the last like 1 or 2% of the lens. But with a Fresnel lens, typical Fresnel lenses at least, it's like the last 20% of the lens that has kind of blur and distortion. So, it's technically correct, yes, but we're talking about a difference between 1 or 2% and 20%. So on a pancake lens, you're going to still notice fixed foveated rendering. You absolutely will. I've tested it, right? Like, we tested it for the studio, whether to use fixed foveated rendering on Quest 3 or not. You can go in, you can use tools on like ADB to toggle it on in your Quest games and see it very visibly. So that's why, again, if you want those 5 or 10 extra frames, it's great. James O'Loughlin pointing out that, the other way you get extra frames is through DLSS, and it is supported in Flight Simulator. You can use this at the same time. In my testing, at least, it seems to work. DLSS and fixed foveated rendering at the same time. But I'm just so ready for that eye-tracked foveated rendering, and I'm so ready for VR headsets to have eye tracking as a standard. I've seen some comments here talking about it, like it needs to be a standard. It is probably going to be seen historically as quite odd that Meta didn't go with eye tracking for Quest 3, even though it did allow them to keep that price at $500, which is very important for them. It's arguable that like there will come a day where the idea of a headset not having eye tracking doesn't make sense. Like you talk to someone and you say, back in my day, headsets didn't even have eye tracking, and they'll look at you funny.
Yeah, good luck to Luggy out there, and thank you to our audience and David for giving that explanation there. Yeah, always please help out those folks on our streams who are into VR. I just you the people who normally tune into the show are fairly knowledgeable with sort of what they need and how to go about buying it. And right now the technology is changing so fast that providing advice on how to like become a new member of this community or buy into simulation is very, very difficult. David is one of the biggest sim fans in the world, and he's intimately aware with how costly it is and how hard it is to get your sim rig going. And we've got so many sim fans out there in our audience. It's going to be a big category, big area of our discussion going forward. But it's just such a pain to get going. So our heart goes out to you if you've been struggling with getting your rig going, and we understand that. So keep those questions coming in the future.
I love James O'Loughlin's comment here. Back in my day, we put our phones into a cardboard box. Yes, we can have another debate another day about whether Google Cardboard was a net positive or net negative for the industry. We do have a hard cutoff today, I think, if I'm correct, in an hour and 10 minutes from now. Is that right?
Yeah, that was the plan. We're gonna plan to get Don in here. I'm gonna take a little break, and then we're gonna do another video here. We're gonna get to basically show Pinball FX VR in Don's living room, and we're gonna have a whole nother discussion, a separate discussion about that experience. Right? We'll
Sure.
have our review here of Pinball FX VR on the site very, very soon, as well as our coverage of Wander, where you can see the graphics comparison. But then, yeah, we're going to come back in here at our hard stop. So let's move through this.
Yeah, exactly. In that case, let's get to the next topic. We don't want to be running out of time today. So, the Apple section. We have two news pieces here. One is visionOS 2.4. The other is Virtual Desktop's new macOS update. So we did cover visionOS 2.4 when it was announced by Apple. And what matters now is that it is actually out. It is not a beta anymore. It is fully out. So this brings Apple Intelligence, Spatial Gallery, and iPhone integration. That Apple Intelligence is a lot of the things that you've seen on iPhone as well, for better and for worse. Priority notifications and notification summaries, smart reply in messages and mail, memory movies and natural language search in photos, priority messages and mail summaries in mail, writing tools, which you kind of see on screen here, where you can use it to kind of brush up your emails, Image Wand in Notes, Genmoji in iMessage, and Image Playground. Nothing yet truly revolutionary. Depending on how many notifications you get, maybe the summaries and priorities are good. Depending on how much email you get, maybe having the priority emails and summarization there and smart reply are helpful for you. It's going to depend on user to user. Natural language search for photos, again, could be useful if you have a lot of photos. You can see a trend here that if you have a lot of something, this Apple Intelligence technology can help you kind of sort through things you have. But there's nothing truly revolutionary here yet from my perspective, but maybe there are some others that are having things differently.
Yeah, a valid question there from TMS. Why does UploadVR cover Vision Pro more than PSVR 2 when there are fewer Vision Pro owners? That's a fair question. Because of the software platform that Apple is building, we have large expectations for their intentions for rolling out that software platform more broadly and actually reaching more people than PSVR 2 over time. That said, David, what do you
Sure,
have
yeah,
to
I
add
know. I
here?
don't think that's the direct reason. I think it's like we're a news website and we cover news, and Apple is updating visionOS regularly, so we cover it, and they're releasing immersive video content. This is the VR download where we don't talk about games. So you'll notice we do cover PlayStation VR 2 games on Upload VR all the time. I'm actually confident that we cover PlayStation VR 2 probably 10 times as many articles on PlayStation VR 2 than we do Vision Pro. But on this show particularly, we're talking about these updates. Sony has released maybe one significant software update for PlayStation VR 2 on PS5, the hand tracking update, and we talked about it on this show. We reported on it. We did a review of it in Walter the Wizard. So I actually don't think it's true. We cover on uploadvr.com PSVR 2 about 10 times as much as we cover Vision Pro. And on this show, probably roughly equally, actually.
So say we all. All right, doing a dim out there. We cover all the hardware except Pimax. Well, you can find us in a Pimax from time to time, but we don't really like those photos, to be honest.
So
Like
we
this.
will. Over the weekend, I was at a event where I was able to try a lot of headsets, and we will have some coverage on the Pimax Crystal Super. And I'm not going to say anything more yet, but pleasantly surprised is what I will kind of give a summary there. And so a big issue of why we don't cover Pimax, though we do cover the news. When Pimax announces a headset, when they ship a headset, we do cover it. So we do. But we have asked Pimax repeatedly for review units, and they have not ever kind of followed up in any meaningful way there. So we can't justify getting a Pimax for the small amount of people that are interested in one and people who would read articles about it relative to its cost. Um, yeah.
And notice that PSVR 2 is actually climbing, and Bigscreen Beyond 2 is also climbing the Steam VR charts. That actually relates to our interest, our area of interest in those products, and like they're like what we cover those movements as one of our areas of discussion, and that's a big indicator of how many people use these systems. What I think you're asking might be a deeper question that I was sort of hinting at is what is the future of the Sony PlayStation VR2 platform, right? Where are they going with it? Who is going to buy into it over the next year? What games are they going to play? Like, those are better questions, and those are questions for Sony that we have as well, right? So we're on it, and David said everything he needed to say over there. It was beautiful. But what's our next subject here?
Yeah, no, and we haven't got through this one. We kind of were started talking about it, and then we took that audience question. So there's a comment from LL here, which I hope is a joke, but in case it isn't, I'm going to clarify saying, thoughts on MRTV taking over the CEO role of Pimax? That was an April Fool's joke. If you were just bringing it up as a joke, very funny. If not, you fell for an April Fool's joke. We don't do April Fool's jokes anymore. I think maybe we did in the past, but I feel like in this world where everything you read is fake anyway, there's no point in just having a day where you do more fake stuff because it's not different anymore. It's like if Santa Claus came every day, it wouldn't be Christmas anymore, right? And so what's the point in April Fools when everything's, a made up joke on the internet anyway these days?
Yeah, David and I arrived at the one exception to that this week, right? We had you get this one out on your bingo cards. Get your bingo cards out, everyone. Walkabout Mini Golf added puppets to the game for April Fools, and I tested them out last night. I had tested them out a couple days ago. They're there. They could get removed at any time, right? That's up to Walkabout Mini Golf. That's up to Mighty Coconut, but they're there. We've got video on our channel. They exist, and we did it. It exists. You can do puppet shows in VR. And what I tested last night is if you do the mobile app, right? If you do mobile Walkabout like this and just hold it in your hand, and then you in VR and someone else like David and you, if you and I we're in VR right now. You had a puppet and I had a puppet. We could go up to the mobile version of us, logged in on phone, and do a little puppet show for the person on the mobile phone, each of us with our own puppet. All right, so that is an April
See,
Fool's joke that actually exists, is my point.
yeah, I like those. I like when it's an April. That's not really an April Fool's joke. It's just adding a fun, cute little feature on April Fool's Day. I love that. If you're, adding something quirky to your VR game, that doesn't count in my sort of modern dislike of April Fools. But yeah, let's continue to talk about this topic because Apple Intelligence is the kind of flagship feature here, but I think the other stuff is actually, in my opinion, more significant, right? So the big news from Apple's perspective is, oh, Vision Pro now has Apple Intelligence. But as I just pointed out, it's not really that useful. But the other things are. So Spatial Gallery, Apple's new platform where you can scroll through kind of like TikTok or Instagram Reels, but in the other direction, you're scrolling left to right, not top to bottom. A bunch of spatial videos and photos. And some of these include behind the scenes footage from Apple shows like Severance and Shrinking, as well as like stuff from artists, Cirque du Soleil, Red Bull, all these really high quality spatial videos and photos. And because we're not talking about immersive video or photos here where it's 180 degree, we're just talking about basically 3D photos and 3D videos. You can scroll through these really quickly. You actually can see multiple at once. You can see kind of the carousel coming from the left to that point Ian was making earlier about VR and AR and MR giving you infinite screen real estate. You scroll through this content. And to me, like there was something when you're trying this spatial gallery that made me think, you can see how eventually a platform at scale comes out of this. So right now, this is a curated correct collection, but you could imagine TikTok or Instagram coming out with a system or the next TikTok or Instagram, right? A couple of college kids right now working on something in somebody's garage, coming out with a system where it is a platform much like these scrollable feeds we have today, except the other direction and optimized for 3D because it is more compelling, right? Like I've tried the traditional feeds in VR and it's cool to have them huge, but that sense of depth that you get in this spatial content is actually really remarkable. And so, if you're a Vision Pro owner, go and try out Spatial Gallery. The last one, I think, is a even bigger deal, right? Than the iPhone integration. So the iPhone app itself, meh, right? It's not really that great. You can remote install apps, which is cool, right? You don't have to put on your Vision Pro anymore just to go and install something and get it ready. You can install it and then go and use it once it's ready. But I think it's the guest mode that's the best of all because if you are one of those people who is fortunate enough to have an Apple Vision Pro, and I want to restate, as we always say, that we know that $3,500 is a ridiculous price and that very few people can afford that. And as we always say, and as Ian was alluding to, our main coverage here is about visionOS as a platform and where that's going to go in future when you eventually can get affordable vision headsets. All that said, if you have one today, what are you going to want to do most of it? Show other people, at least if you're anything like me. And the guest flow process of putting it on and configuring guest mode and then putting it on someone's head. And if they have to take it off for any reason, you have to restart it. That sucked. So the biggest feature of visionOS 2.4 for me, what will really matter to people is this iPhone driven guest mode that lets you do all of this on the iPhone side. It just works. You tap I've tried it on an iPad, right? Because I don't have an iPhone, but I do have an iPad. You tap this, you set it up by, clicking all of the apps that you want them to have access to. You can, whitelist exactly which apps you want them to use. It starts AirPlay, mirroring of their view automatically. It all just works and it's great. So I'm very happy to see Apple finally make the guest mode not suck. And that's going to matter for most people because the sum of the number of people who get a demo from their friend with a Vision Pro is actually greater than the number of people who own a Vision Pro. So this will impact more people, funny enough, than the other stuff.
It looks like Wanderer is out there. We've got that confirmation from a couple people mentioning it in our comments. So Wanderer is out there on PSVR 2 and Quest, I believe, but you need to confirm that's on both storefronts. That is a big one that a lot of people have been anticipating. We should have a graphics comparison over on UploadVR.com that you can look at the differences between PSVR 2 and Quest. And then we'll have a lot of coverage later as we get into that deep. And I saw that Guy Godin had to go. So if you've got any questions about our upcoming stories about if you've got any questions for Guy Godin, you can go find him on Discord over on Twitter at VR Desktop. I love that he's always been at VR Desktop on Twitter. Right? You can still find him there, even though I'm no longer on that hell place that you all still go around in. I still respect the naming of himself as that all this time.
Yeah, it's really bad timing because we're just going to talk about that right now. So it sucks that Guy Godin, the developer of Virtual Desktop, has to leave at this exact moment. I kind of hoped we'd kind of get through some earlier topics quicker, but we weren't able to. So it is what it is. People are reacting in the comments I see to the $50 price of Wanderer. I'm excited to see our coverage, and you will be seeing coverage right now on UploadVR.com, if I'm correct, and in the coming days as well.
Yeah, sorry, I'm just trying to follow everything that's going on over there. Yeah, the embargoes are weird. All the games. One of the reasons we do VR download on Thursday, go back to the conspiracy thing that we've joked about in the past of all the news dropping. One of the reasons we do our news on Thursdays is because that tends to be the day that the games release. And it's a good time, and like mentally speaking, I guess, just if you're watching, because you get people going into the weekend. You give a good 24 hours for everyone to talk about everything before the weekend starts approaching, and you give yourself a nice 3-day span. So it's one of the reasons we encounter this, I think, David, is just it's the right time for VR for you to get your headset ready for VR. Like I would install my 3 or 10 gigabyte apps on my Vision Pro on Thursday to go experience them on Friday. And that kind of makes sense.
Yeah, I guess the remote install there is going to be helpful. And that's something that is already been on Quest for years and years. If you don't already do it, you can do it in the mobile app, right? If you don't know this, you don't have to put on your Quest to install an app. You can remote install, and that seems vital. because why would you want to just sit and watch a loading screen inside a headset? Yeah, so let's talk about Virtual Desktop. So it has a big macOS update, and basically what happened here is that it used to be outsourced. So Guy had always written his own Windows streamer, but the macOS streamer he had outsourced to someone else, and the quality just was not the same as Guy's Windows one. And so what he did is he spent the last 6 months learning low-level native macOS development. Classic, brilliant to hear. And what he was able to do is basically rewrite this thing from scratch, the streamer on macOS. And just to be clear here, we're not talking about PC VR streaming. Mac doesn't support VR, right? There's no Steam VR dropped support for Mac years and years ago. There's no other OpenXR runtime on Mac. So we're talking about Virtual Desktop's original functionality, which is still used by many people, which is just streaming your PC monitors as virtual screens and spawning extra side monitors. So that's what we're referring to here today, the monitor streaming use case of Virtual Desktop. And so with this new update, not only does it have feature parity with Windows, meaning you can spawn these extra side monitors without needing third-party software, Virtual Desktop will do it all for you, but it's also the quality, the latency, the smoothness, everything is just so much better now. And in fact, as Guy has, loved to announce, it is smoother than the Mac Virtual Display on Vision Pro. So we're talking about viewing your Mac via either a Quest headset using Virtual Desktop or a Vision Pro using Apple's Mac Virtual Display. And Virtual Desktop is higher frame rate and lower latency. That's what we mean by smoother. So theoretically, Apple could increase the frame rate of Mac Virtual Display, but right now they haven't. And so that means that it just feels smoother for one, and also it's suitable for gaming. Mac Virtual Display is not suitable for 3D first-person gaming. You can kind of do 2D gaming right now, but it's just not high enough resolution, or it's not high enough frame rate to really be suitable for gaming. Now, that said, there are a few caveats here, which I can already see mentioned in the comments. The first minor caveat is that Mac Virtual Display is still sharper. So Virtual Desktop is very sharp, and it's great, and it's really, really impressive, but something about Apple's solution is even better. Now, it could just be the headset. It could be the fact that Vision Pro is obviously a 4K micro OLED, or near 4K, I should say, versus Quest 2's 2K LCD. Could and probably is just that. It also could be the fact that Apple is using foveation, so they're using the eye tracking of the Vision Pro headset to, again, as we were discussing earlier, only stream the area that you're looking at on your Mac in full resolution, and then the rest of it at lower resolution. But the other bigger difference between Virtual Desktop and Mac Virtual Display, the bigger difference by far, is that Mac Virtual Display does something remarkable. It creates a direct point-to-point connection between your headset and your Mac. So that means it doesn't matter what Wi-Fi network you have. It doesn't even matter if you have a Wi-Fi network at all. Even if you're on a plane, a train, in the yard, in the middle of a field, theoretically in space, it doesn't matter, because that connection is happening between the Vision Pro and the Mac, direct point-to-point, no configuration, in seconds automatically. This is obviously the advantage of Apple's full stack, low-level control over the software of macOS and visionOS. And it's unclear if any developer could actually do this in a seamless, automatic way. I'm sure you could pull it off if there was configuration needed by the user, but not in a seamless way. So as I see some people in the comments pointing out, if you have a good network, Virtual Desktop is great. You've got a high quality Wi-Fi router, your headset's in the same room, it's great. But still, the best way to access your Mac for me, because of this direct point-to-point thing, is going to be through the Vision Pro. Now, this isn't a comparison that really matters to most people, right? You may kind of be picking up on this, because I'm comparing an app on Quest to a feature of Vision Pro. So either you own a Quest 3 or a Vision Pro, and you're not choosing between the two of them, right? Very, very few people in this world have both headsets and are choosing, like, which one do I want to use to view my Mac. But maybe you're buying with that interest, and then kind of this is a consideration there. So I still think if you do want that, you're going to get a Vision Pro. And if you do need the higher frame rate, you can either just use Steam Link to play games on your Mac on a giant virtual screen through your Vision Pro, or you can wait for virtual desktop support because Guy Godin is working on a port of virtual desktop for visionOS because it's virtual desktop is still only available on the Android-based headsets like Quest, Pico, Vive, etc. And to be clear, this macOS streaming does work on all of these Android headsets.
Goodness, very distracted by my multitasking today. So sorry if I'm a little distant, David. I love the comments ongoing. Everyone just discussing Wi-Fi 6, and I love the one person mentioning that their router was provided by their internet service provider. That is the standard experience for
Yes.
most people worldwide, and that's a bummer. It's a huge, huge bummer. It's such a bottleneck on everything we do. The holodeck story that I wrote about last week, I talked about you put 5 people on a holodeck, you've got that track render display cycle going around, and each person is generating something like 1.2 gigabytes of data per minute or something like that, between the video that's getting made over on the computer and just getting ported around the network to make track render display work. That's not a ton of data. Like we don't think of that as a ton of data. It's just getting it through a wireless standard that isn't meant for reliable data transfer. It's like trying to use email to try to get you comfortable VR. It's the wrong technology for the job.
Yeah, so I do think this is getting better over time, though, right? In the UK, at least, you see the newer ISP supplied routers are, adopting Wi-Fi 6E, Wi-Fi 7. Mesh networks are becoming common, even supplied by your ISP. So it really is one of the things that when people do upgrade their ISP or move house or whatever, they will kind of get that upgrade. But as you point out, Ian, it is true to say that a lot of people are using the router the ISP gave them 15 or 20 years ago. Maybe not that extreme, but 10 or 15 years ago. And, that is a really difficult situation for trying to do stuff like this, which is why, again, I just think that point-to-point connection, that like headset to PC, nothing in between, is the future. We talked about it last week, I think, when we talked about the Steam VR Link dongle, or maybe it was the week before. That's going to be critical. And the fact that Apple can do that out of the box is the magic of end-to-end software control. Sony could do this on PS5, right? Or maybe more accurately, I should say PS6. If they wanted to do a PlayStation VR 3 headset for PlayStation 6, they could do that point-to-point wireless connection with the PlayStation 6, setting it up. These are the kind of examples of things where when the company controls the hardware and the software all the way down to the firmware, they can do this themselves. And on the kind of fragmented PC ecosystem, you're going to have to do this via, an accessory or Microsoft's adoption or a bunch of configuration that regular people don't really want to get involved with. I love Shal Alaska's comment that we need a virtual desktop branded dongle. Guy Godin has said that he does not want to take the years off his life and add the stress and gray hairs of dealing with releasing hardware, because hardware is hard, as they say. It really, really is. And let's let Guy Godin kind of not die of stress. So
yeah, like the writing a really, really solid line of code, right? Something that makes sense logically and is just beautiful. It's not the same as like, what are the tolerance stresses of this piece of wood or metal or whatever, and like, will it break apart when dropped? Like, nobody wants to, like, just, I want to go back to writing code. Like, let the man write his code, leave him alone. Like, all right.
Yeah, there's no update for hardware, right? You can update the firmware, but if you make a design flaw, if there's something wrong with the physical hardware, it's a physical recall. And that word even has almost got diluted these days because people now use the word recall to refer to software updates in cars as well. I hate that. It's one of the things I hate most about the mainstream tech media. Giant recall. And then you click the article and it's a software update. I mean, a real recall where the physical hardware had to get taken back and changed. That's a nightmare. And that's just like, even getting the thing produced in the first place is difficult at a profit. We talk about this so much, how you can make a prototype relatively easily, but to produce something at scale, at high yield, without defects, and for less than what you're selling it for, it is the stuff of people who have patience and how should I say this, inner peace.
I'm seeing Chester out there saying that looks like Pinball FXVR is out there. So that's the thing you want to tune in for after David gets out of here in the studio. We have a lot of people tuning in. Hit that like button and share this link out with new people who are just getting into VR for the first time. I think Don and I will have a very accessible conversation over there about Pinball VR FX when we get our stream up and running. Should be me here back in this studio with Don up here on this TV. No promises. The tech changes on us from day to day to break these things. But we'll be in his living room and we'll be able to take a tour through all of the pinball tables that are out there. And you can see up close what it's like to have a one-to-one arcade cabinet that's like the right size or kind of the right size. Our review out there notes all sorts of interesting things. Like there's a difference in scale between VR and mixed reality. I watched it on some of the videos out there. That's a little bit off-putting, and we'll be able to watch that on stream with Don. But at the same time, we'll actually have a physical arcade cabinet in his office in his office in Missouri. I've got one here, and it's really, really, really interesting to play this game that kind of like opened up the idea of arcades to us all, right? Like the whole idea of an arcade kind of exists because pinballs were so popular. So, yeah, we'll
Yeah.
have that in a little bit.
Yeah, let's talk about our next topic, which is Meta becoming the official technology partner of the UFC, including for Quest. So right now, it actually is already possible with a UFC Fight Pass to watch UFC fights in X Stadium, the same app that we talk about supporting the NBA. But I'm not in the US, so I haven't been able to test that out to see like how many fights is that. Obviously, that is also at a cost. What I wonder here is, what are we going to see out of this? We don't know. It's just like one of those things where they've announced a partnership, not any specifics, but we could see maybe immersive streaming of these fights to Quest for free. Maybe at a price. We'll have to see. I think the exclusive nature of this means that you're not going to get this on Vision Pro. And we should point out, right, that UFC, I think, is the fastest growing sport in the world and has been for many years now, and is one of the things that went from, 30 years ago being thought of as like a kind of freak thing of cage fighting is now a very mainstream sport and one of the most popular sports on the planet. So this is quite significant for Quest owners.
Was it who was the martial artist involved in the original Matrix movies? Was it Jet Li? I can't remember. Or someone who basically said, "I'm not going to come back to the movies because they're basically making a library of my moves to use for the CG artists." Um, two people grappling, two people grappling out there. What is it, on Octagon, right? I don't. You can tell how much UFC I watch. But there's two people grappling out there, and all the ways human bodies grapple with one another would surely give Meta a library of all ways in which two humans fight with one another or interact. And I can imagine that being useful in all sorts of other sports and any other kind of broadcast, right? Like you could then go from this one sport out to having models of human bodies everywhere. I'd be really curious if the fighters who come to fight in these things have any thoughts on their data being used to train Meta's AI servers or not. Because I'm seeing people asking, what's the format? What is the format of these broadcasts?
We don't
And
know.
I'm kind of hinting this is the format, right? The format is body data capture.
Yeah, I mean, with the thing we talked about, the NBA on Vision Pro recently, we have that little tabletop view that's doing real-time motion capture of these athletes to make that possible. Maybe you get that here, but I feel like this is less suitable for that. I feel like what you're going to want is just that on kind of some of these corners, or maybe up here, you have an immersive camera giving you 180-degree 3D immersive video view, ideally live. You would really hope they would get it to be live. And yeah, I think this is one of those things that, just like when we talked about the NBA and just like when we talk about the potential of NFL, this sells headsets to people who otherwise wouldn't be interested in a headset. Already, I've spoken to people who, sometimes I say on this podcast, like, oh yeah, sure, you have those 52 NBA games in 180-degree on Quest 3, but it's 2D, it's not 3D, so it sucks. I've gotten like messages and emails from people telling me, it's not perfect, but I actually bought a headset for this and I love it. So I always have to kind of be careful when I say like, oh, the speeds and speeds aren't up to quality. If you love something, you don't really care, right? Like if you're the world's biggest UFC fan and you can go out and buy one of these headsets and see right in front of you in 180 or ideally 3D the fight, you're going to be like, this is great, right? Just like for each of us, try to think of when we talk about these topics, try to think of what's your interest in life. What's the thing that you love to watch live? For me, it's rocket launches, right? I love to watch certain rocket launches. For other people, it'll be snooker or football or what we would call soccer, and sorry, what you would call soccer, we would call football. Whatever it happens to be, maybe it's not a sport at all. Maybe it's something that I can't even think of a good example right now. But whatever that interest is for you, imagine being able to see it in immersive video in VR and seeing that like the biggest organization behind it partnered with the headset. And that's kind of what you need to imagine UFC fans thinking of this news about. But again, we need to see what exactly is the format. What are the details here?
Wait, can we use VR to make basketball an actual game? Can we? Because like you're not gonna get a whole like audience to watch basketball um together because you're gonna use those courts for other reasons. But if we've got a VR court that's sized for basketball, maybe we could pull it off. All right, I don't know if someone.
What's basketball?
Oh my gosh, basketball is the the South Park movie. If you've never seen the movie before, they made South Park movies. They made a movie called Basketball, and it basically is horse. If you've ever played horse, do you know what horse is, David?
No.
I love discovering differences between the people over the pond and the Americans. So horse is a game where you come in front of the basket and you have to make a shot. You make a shot, and then the person has to copy your shot. If they make the shot, then they get to do a shot that you have to copy, and so on and so forth. Well, basketball is this very funny movie that imagines a sport that's kind of like baseball, where you have to go around to each spot, but it's basketball. And we should have VR basketball leagues, right? We can make it happen, guys. We don't have to let it just be in the movies. All right.
Yeah, so one comment I want to address here from Actual is asking, people who watch sports are VR nerds too. And I think that's the thing you really need to kind of think about differently, because there is this assumption still that we're still in the era where everyone that owns a headset today is a VR nerd. And it's not true, right? Just in the same way that everyone who owns a drone today isn't a drone enthusiast, right? And I'm including all kinds of drones, even the $10 ones on Amazon. Like there are maybe somewhere between 500,000 and a couple of million VR enthusiasts, like people who live and breathe VR, right? And that's a high estimate. It might only be a couple of 100,000. There are north of 20 million Quest headsets out there. So we're already in an era where most people who use VR aren't watching this show. They aren't reading UploadVR every day. They are just out there using their headset as another device in their life. They're not keeping up with all the news. They use it for whatever they use it for, be it, playing walkabout mini golf with friends, going on VR chatter rec room, playing a shooter like Onward or Pavlov or Population One, playing a single player game, or maybe they're doing their PC VR simulators. Maybe they have their headset set up with their sim racing rig or their flight sim rig. These people are just trucking on, they're just playing their game or doing their experience. Some of them are doing it for fitness, right? Some of them play Supernatural and they've used this to transform their fitness. All of these things are happening. And then, now with headsets getting higher resolution, you're starting to see people use this for productivity and work too. And all out to us and me, and they tell us and me how they're using this. And I just have to stress that like the vast majority of them, they aren't VR nerds. Like a lot of them, they don't keep up with any of the news. They couldn't tell you what the next headset coming out is. They couldn't tell you what the industry drama is. They're just using it. So we're already in an era where that's happening. And I think once you get these use cases coming out, we've said it all the time on this show with immersive video, people who have otherwise no interest in VR will buy these headsets to sit and watch their favorite sport as if they were right there in the front row.
Yeah, I love that, David. And I couldn't pull the trigger on finishing this article, the publish button. I couldn't hit the publish button on this article just before because it was such a busy morning. But everything you just said about VR, I heard the opposite of from this guy who caught a home run at an MLB game while wearing the Meta Ray-Ban glasses. And this guy's, I sat on the phone with him for like 45 minutes, and he just told me about ball hawking, I think is what he calls it, where he's trying to catch, is like his lifelong mission, his hobby in life is, I'm going to catch a lot of balls at a baseball game. And he's got 1,000 of them, I think, at home, he was saying. And so I was looking at this video of him catching this ball, and then you can cut it from the MLB broadcast to him being inside the glasses, just losing his mind, because this was essentially a lifelong dream of his, to capture a ball with the Ray-Ban, to capture a home run ball at an MLB game. And when he did it, he caught it on the Ray-Ban smart glasses. So I have this video floating around in an article ready to go on it. But his passion, what came out in that discussion was like, I wanted the Oculus for a while. Like, I was really interested in it, but my time is limited now, and I need to focus on family. And the glasses, as they are today, let me do that, while also letting me do this one specific thing, which is capture my perspective as I do my favorite activity, which is catch fly balls at MLB games, right? And so, like, it's the same technology that he's wearing in every photo that isn't in a VR headset, right? This man is wearing two types of glasses, headwear, right? He's wearing glasses, he's wearing headsets. And you all need to, like, wake up that this is the overall trend. It's not going away, it's happening.
Yep. So let's move on, because I think we have half an hour left now, to our last two topics, because we're going to want to discuss each of them a lot. And, speaking of glasses, Ian, actually speaking of smart glasses, you've perfectly transitioned us onto our next topic. So this is that the pricing, the details, and the features of the Meta HUD glasses set to launch this year have been reportedly revealed. So this comes from Bloomberg's Mark Gurman, who has a very good track record of reporting on Meta's and Apple's future product moves in advance. We talk about Gurman's reports all the time on this show. Sometimes we talk about it one year, and then the next year what he said becomes true. And actually, before Quest 3 launched, Gurman got a chance to use a Quest 3 and was one of the first to kind of talk about how the pass-through was a lot better than Quest Pro, and that he was one of the first people to reveal that. And now he seems to have gotten his hands on these HUD glasses that are coming later this year, and so he's being able to describe like how they work, as well as he seems to have spoken to some people on the project and gotten details of the kind of pricing to expect. So before we start here, what do I mean by HUD glasses? Well, today you have the Ray-Ban Meta smart glasses that don't have a display. And in future, we will eventually get AR glasses that can put virtual objects and interfaces into real-world space. But what's going to happen before those full AR glasses arrive is that we're going to see a middle ground product class come from multiple companies, Meta being only one of them, HUD glasses. So according to this report, these HUD glasses will do everything that the Ray-Ban Meta glasses do, so that you'll have Bluetooth audio streaming from your phone for music, podcasts, audiobooks, phone calls. You'll have the ability to take photos and videos by pressing the button on the side or using your voice. You'll have Meta AI, so that's both just for conversational and for using the camera to see the real world and interact. But they will also add 3 new changes to the hardware. So the biggest is that it will have a small monocular display in the lower region of the right lens, a very small field of view, fixed HUD in one eye. The next, a higher quality camera. So according to Gurman, it will be like the difference between an iPhone 11 and 13. If the Ray-Ban Meta glasses today are iPhone 11, this will be iPhone 13 camera quality. And the next is that it will come with Meta's long in development neural wristband as the input device. So you will still be able to swipe the right temple of these glasses to adjust the volume and to browse through the apps that this thing will show on this little interface, which according to Gurman will be a little row with apps like camera, photos, and maps. But that's obviously clunky and arduous. You don't want to hold your hand up and kind of awkwardly swipe. The main way to interact with these HUD glasses will be through this wristband. And so it goes on your wrist, as you might imagine, being a wristband, and it can sense the muscle movement inside your wrist via the electrical signals to determine how your fingers are moving. And in the eventual future, this will be really, really precise, and it'll be like having full hand tracking that we have now, except without any cameras needing to see your hand. But it sounds like for the first generation, it's going to be more simple, more about detecting certain gestures. So according to Gurman, you will kind of twist your wrist to scroll through the apps and then tap with your fingers to select. And previous reports have suggested that you may kind of be able to also swipe with your thumb on your index finger and tap using a kind of D-pad. So we'll have to see exactly how that is implemented. So this means that instead of just having no display, you'll be able to kind of bring up your photos, frame your pictures with a camera by seeing in a little kind of small view what it's going to look like, have a maps view so that you're seeing like step-by-step instructions, navigation details as you're walking around a city, for example, instead of having to strain down at your watch or look at your phone or whatever. And again, all through one eye. Now, here comes the kicker. According to Gurman, this product, the glasses and the wristband together, will be over $1,000 and as high as $1,300 to $1,400. So that is a very high price. And just as a last bit of context, according to a previous report from The Information, because Gurman is not the only person who's talked about these HUD glasses, there are 4 or 5 different sources that say that Meta is going to release these things later this year. Whereas the current Ray-Ban Meta glasses are 50 grams, the addition of the extra hardware here, the projector and display in one eye, the better camera, likely larger battery, means that this will be 70 grams. So 20 grams or 10% heavier than 40% heavier than the Ray-Ban Meta glasses.
So great discussion in our comments there. One person, who was it? They were asking how much of this total price is the wristband. The great question. It is the core question. I'm going to take a step back or over this and just point out there's no display on this device. And I feel it's stupid to point that out, right? Of course there's no display on this device, but it means it's a band and not a watch, right? It's a whole new product category that we're not familiar with.
Well,
right?
there is Whoop trackers today, which are that, right? It's this, but just for fitness tracking. Sorry, just to interrupt you there, but it is interesting to think about, like, could they do something more than that with this?
Yes. All right. So yes, good point, David. Yeah, there are things in this category. And what can you do with this when you've got one on your wrist versus what happens when you've got one on both of your wrists? So what you can imagine is, like, what is this path that Mark Zuckerberg and Andrew Bosworth, these people who are wondering if it's a great misadventure or not right now, what do they want to do with this? What happens when you wear two of these? And I've got it on the record on UploadVR.com, on our channel, with our audience here, that the head of this program can replace his keyboard as of years ago. And I wanted to pursue more on this, and I'm open to pursuing more on this. And Meta PR, I would like to tell that story, because it is a very, very fascinating story of how do you train your brain to type on a pair of these wristbands faster or even close to a keyboard. There's some really interesting research from Google that was just released towards the same idea. They've explored all sorts of ideas. There's like this takeaway that as long as you're only using these two fingers to type, there's going to be hard limits on how many words per minute you can reach. You got to bring in those other 3 digits you got here on either hand in order to get up to really high speeds. Well, this thing does it. And I got to just spend time us all looking at this display-free device and go, does Apple believe so much in VR that they're going to ship an Apple Watch without a display? Are they going to launch a new product category that is just the Apple Watch band and what it provides you? And how is that going to fit into their ecosystem? This is the innovator's dilemma that is like the underlying subject of a lot of what we do. Meta is going straight for the heart of every single person. This is the missing piece that could be everything to unlock Meta's dreams for them, right? Like their ownership of you as your next 20 years, your next 30 years might be wearing one of these bands on your wrist, or one of the future generations of these bands on your wrists, to control both the headsets and glasses.
Yeah, absolutely. Particularly for smart glasses, be they simple display list glasses, be they HUD glasses, be they AR glasses. If you're out in public walking along, you need an input device. You need something that is better than either talking out loud, right? You can use voice commands, but do you really want to dictate your entire message to your wife or your husband or whatever on the bus out loud to other people? Of course you don't. Um, the other idea of, like, tapping the side, that sucks. Like, anyone who's tried to use these tap the side controls on these glasses, at most you want to use it for like pausing or playing music, maybe turning the volume up and down. You don't want to use it for any kind of complex control. Hand tracking in the air, it's possible, but like it's a bit arduous, right? You don't want to be sitting like this on the bus or the train or walking along in the street, like going, like typing on a virtual keyboard that's floating along past you, right? You need to have something that is more akin to not the touch screen, but the mouse. What is the mouse? It's a device that lets you translate very minute movements into very large and very precise input, right? The mouse is the kind of analogy here, not the touchscreen. So the touchscreen is the only input device that kind of had the impact of the mouse, and obviously greater than the mouse, but it doesn't kind of directly analogize here. So the idea is that, yes, the first generation of this is going to be simple. It'll probably just be about taps and rotations and maybe kind of swipes and things like that. But eventually you get to the point where you can have very, very precise, perfect finger tracking. And then you can have your hand in your jacket, just as you can with the first gen, but you can literally be sitting there with your hand in your jacket pocket, controlling very precise interfaces that are floating in front of you without ever having to raise your hand or speak out loud. And that matters. But just to push back on the display thing, I actually think, like, we've seen previous reports from The Verge that suggest that Meta are going to make a version of this with a display. And so maybe you don't need that all the time, but I would like to at least just see the time or something here for if my glasses run out of battery, something like that, my Fitbit today. And I imagine when Apple does this, they will just add it as a feature to the watch, right? It will be that the Apple Watch Ultra will get it when their AR glasses come out one day, and then the regular Apple Watch, and then the SE, and then the whole lineup.
But let me paint another picture for our audience here, and I'm going to thank Arlen for putting this picture in my head. Arlen, out there, if you're still, I hope you're caught up for this section. Display actually might need a different terminology for wrist haptics, right? You can actually use the term display to refer to a haptics display, right? Like the terminology goes one-to-one. You can refer to a haptics display, and you actually refer to the resolution of the haptics display, right, too. What I want to paint this picture of is, imagine a pair of these wristbands on tightly around your wrists, and you think, I'm angry, right? You just go, I'm mad, right? You send this signal, right, in your brain. And these haptic displays around the wrist that are paired with the tracking, but like, they're alongside the tracking, right? Makes you feel like metal is sliding out from your wrists. You feel like there's suddenly a metal protrusion coming out of your wrists right here and up through the edges of your hand and out through the back of your fingers because of these vibrations at your wrist. You feel like it's sliding, like this metal is sliding out of your hands. And suddenly you're Wolverine in VR, right? You're actually Wolverine in VR, and you can stick your hands into walls. You can climb around. Arlen has been telling us about this game idea for weeks and months, and we are on board. We've talked to Meta about this idea because of how good it is. This is the input device to make that experience. The idea of the metal sliding out of your wrists, you haven't felt it, right? You haven't felt that happen before. And when you feel it, it's like, oh yeah, I'm not going back. Yeah.
Yeah, for VR, it's certainly an interesting extra avenue for haptics. It opens up a great question, right? You kind of even haven't brought the original question here is, will these also be supported on Quest? Is this going to be just for the smart glasses for the foreseeable future, or will you be able to buy this neural wristband from Meta separately and pair it. It also, the question we haven't even asked before we get there, will you be able to use two at first, or how long will it be? Right now, the idea is one of these things goes on one wrist and it's used as a controller for these glasses. Will it come to VR? Will you be able to do both? Will enough developers care if you have to buy a $200 wristband twice over to get it on both wrists? But yeah, I get what you're saying. It would be definitely cool to see extra VR games, and you're using the example of Wolverine, where you would want to get haptics there as well as just in your hand. It's an extra haptic effect. It would be cool, but I think on the grand scheme of what this is useful for, that seems relatively minor to the VR game haptic thing.
Jack says this is Ian's Joy-Con 2.0 fantasy. Just let him have it. All right, Arlen, go after him. All right, fight on my behalf. It's all of our dreams, okay? No, I appreciate that. And I appreciate that this isn't what we expect out at first, right? We expect just the micro gestures to be the first use of this. And then you could see it potentially clicking and tapping, enhancing that effect of double tapping and giving you a little bit of haptic feedback every time you make one of those gestures to let you know, oh yeah, it actually succeeded. That would be where this begins. But imagine Gen 2, Gen 3, Gen 4, and imagine it combined with held objects in really fluid ways, right? Like that's where we're going with this.
Yeah. So just to come back to the glasses, because we've spoken a lot about the input device, and I agree with the commenters and with Ian that the input device is arguably the most important part of this. The glasses themselves, there are some things I'm looking forward to, and others I'm deeply skeptical about. So for me, one thing I'm really looking forward to is this Maps app that Gurman says is there. He doesn't go into details about what this Maps app is, but I don't know about you, but I absolutely detest navigating using a phone or a smartwatch in a city. So it sucks. It really sucks to have to kind of put your head down and look at a, Google Maps view while you're trying to walk through a crowd, or maybe walk with a friend or something. It's just so it feels like you're in a different world when you're trying to be in this world. And I hate it so much. And I think it's one of the most promising use cases for smart glasses and AR glasses eventually. With AR glasses, full AR glasses, you'll get these giant floating blue arrows that kind of point you directly to where you need to go, as if you have the super easy tutorial mode on in a video game. But with these, even with these HUD glasses, you'll be able to get a kind of GTA mini map appear in your view. And this is why you're still looking up. You still have a full view of the world. You're not craning your neck down. You're able to kind of see exactly what's going on. And when GPS isn't working well, which it doesn't work well in cities when there's skyscrapers, these glasses would have the potential to do VPS, which your phone can do, but you have to hold your phone up, and that just looks and feels weird versus walking around with glasses. So that's what I'm looking forward to with this. What I'm deeply skeptical about is the monocular display part. Monocular HUD. So we're saying that you don't need a display on this on the wristband because you have one on the glasses. So if you need to know the time, you just look down at the little HUD, or maybe you tap the side to turn it on. Maybe it saves battery by not being on all the time. That's fine. Okay, whatever. But I have tried monocular HUDs before. I've tried these in prototypes at CES and other trade shows, and I really disliked it. So I wonder if the combination of the monocular aspect and the high price, up to $1,400, I wonder if this is going to be what Quest Pro was to Quest 2. This might be to the Ray-Ban glasses. And we should note that Gurman does say that Meta plans a binocular version in 2027, a direct successor to this product. And so I think that's what I would wait for. Again, we'll see it at the time. We're talking about a product that hasn't even been announced yet. It's obviously difficult to say what do you wait for, but I'm going to be putting my eyes in these and just saying, does this suck as much as every other monocular display sucks? This if you're in VR and you've tried enough experimental stuff. You'll have tried at least once a VR game or an app or a world where they only render a shader or display feature in one eye. And you'll be like, what the hell's going on here? Why does this feel so weird?
Get me out.
You'll close one eye and realize, yeah, you know what I mean? So if you've ever tried that, imagine that, except that's how the product's supposed to work. But mind-boggling to me that they actually would ship this as a product. But maybe they know something I don't. Maybe they figured out some way to make it not comfortable. Google Glass did it. I hated it about Google Glass too.
Yeah. All right. So I'm gonna philosophize here a little bit. Go back to the guy catching the baseball at the MLB game. Okay. So he has to have all of the poise of a baseball player while being in the stands as a fan in order to make that catch of that baseball in the crowd. And he did it, right? He went and pressed. What he did was he practiced for weeks at different baseball games, paying attention to the game, to the exact moment that a ball is likely to come in my direction. He waits for seeing that it's coming, and then he presses the button on the side of the glasses, and then he captures this scene coming to him. And I had this discussion with this guy who's like liking the glasses, and he sees the potential of AR over time. Like he described using the glasses for things like asking for player facts. I would like to know more about number 6 over there. And sure enough, the glasses answer him with facts. But what's remarkable about what he did, and what David, you pointed out to me in my draft that I'm working on this, is the glasses as they currently stand, without any display whatsoever, allows for that focus the same as the player on the field, right? Like there's nothing in between this guy and a glove in his hand, and just calculating the math in his head for where that ball is going to drop, and then moving his body physically to get there in the right spot in the glasses. And no amount of like pop-ups are going to help him get to that thing more. What will help him is like the best computer vision you've ever imagined, a whole lot more wattage coming out of his head, and 3 more seconds of arc time to know exactly where that ball is going to drop, right? That requires the augmentation that you're going to find out of a VR headset. Like, you're going to need more bulk to get you that kind of assistance with knowing where that ball is going to drop. You're not going to get it out of this experience he wants. All this is long-winded to say, if there had been a heads-up display right there in his periphery, right, in the corner of one eye, would he have made that catch, or would he have been distracted, right?
Sure.
And is that display on there? Is it even visible by the slightest degree when it's off?
So let me push back there. So one thing this report says, and this is quite common for these kind of glasses, is that it's not in front of you. It's actually below. So you have to rotate your eye down to see it. So the kind of almost isn't a heads-up display. The other thing I would say is, you notice when he asked the question, tell me more about number 6. Well, there's not just visual distractions in this world. There's audio distractions. And right now, when you ask that question, Meta AI yaps in your ear. And if you're standing next to someone and you want to have a conversation, but you just wanted a quick piece of information, sometimes you'll take out your phone, not because it's faster or better, but just because you don't want something yapping in your ear. So a real potential here is that when you ask Meta AI a question on these HUD glasses that are coming, you can opt to get the answer as text. So while you're still listening to your friend beside you, and while you're still in the moment, not distracted by the yapping audio, as the kids would say, you look down and you read the text at your own leisure, and then you just miss it when you're done with it. So you get those stats below there. And because it's not up, so your audio is clear, you're still in the moment. You can look down when you want. You can look up when you want. Maybe it would distract you, though. You're right. Maybe while you're reading that text, you missed the catch. It's a completely valid thing to point out. But I do just think that we have to point out that it's not adding something without taking something away. It's taking away the audio distraction that was there before.
Interesting. I really love that breakdown. I think what I wanted to get across was a similar idea, and it's that AR glasses, like we're discussing, actually are best when they're out of the way and they don't distract you whatsoever. What's great is so the task I imagined was, okay, imagine this guy coming up to the baseball game and he looks out at the field and he says, "Hey Meta, I want to catch a home run ball from this baseball game. Can you help me out?" And Meta AI automatically listens and figures out all the settings of the glasses around him and even goes and finds the feed for the baseball game and pulls that in and starts using that as part of its intelligence to fade away every part of visual distraction anytime a player comes up to the bat, right? So to the point, like, let's say you're listening to music, right? You're listening to this great song on these glasses, and the batter comes up to bat, and you've told the AI your task is to catch a fly ball. Well, the AI automatically fades down the music down to about 5%, so you can hear the crack of the bat really well. And then right after the swing, it goes back up to 30%, ever so slightly, right? You get the audio just a little bit louder, and then it fades down automatically the next time someone comes up to bat, right? My point is that we're talking about two opposites. VR is actually at its best when you're completely focused on the other place. AR is actually at its best when you're completely focused on reality. Now, you can layer on mixed reality in both scenarios, on the AR glasses and the VR glasses, to have different scenarios. But like at its core, you actually want the AR glasses to not provide you a whole bunch of visuals most of the time. You want it to stay out of the way until it's actually needed.
No, I agree with that, and I think it will be contextual, not just for reasons of focus, but for battery life, right? So again, we're talking about these three classes of glasses: displayless smart glasses like the Ray-Bans. On the other side, the AR glasses that are coming in a few years, and then in the middle, this HUD glasses. So they're not AR, they're not putting virtual objects, they can't highlight things, it can't highlight the player. It's just a fixed little view of in your front of you. As you move your head, it stays there. It's a little bit of text, it's a little bit of photos. So we're talking about that, and I think even these three categories are going to stack up to become modes for even the AR glasses. So for simple battery reasons, you can't be doing full augmented reality for 8 or 10 hours a day. That's decades away, or some sort of crazy breakthrough in battery technology. So the majority of the time you're wearing these AR glasses, I would suggest you're actually going to not see anything at all. You're going to just be playing some music in your ear. You'll maybe get like a ding of a notification, and then you tap your finger to your wrist you tap your finger to your index finger to bring it up, right? But by default, it is no display. By choice, it's a HUD, and then only for when it's needed, right? So say you go on to you're sitting on, you've walked off to the bus, you get on the bus, and now you want to watch a YouTube video. Well, then it becomes, on the way, you tap to bring up a notification, and that turns into a HUD. And then when you get on the bus, you activate the AR mode by bringing up a YouTube video and pinning it in front of you. So it's floating a meter in front of you, and you're sitting there watching that. That's the kind of, so it's what I want to really underscore here is that like these are both device categories and they're modes that stack. So even the HUD glasses, the vast majority of the time, no display. Even with the AR glasses, the vast majority of the time, no AR.
I think we've got our last subject here, and we're going to spend our last few minutes here discussing it here with David. Might go a few minutes over our dead stop. I think we're going to get back in here basically a half hour after we finish to go through the mixed reality pinball arcade on Don Hopper's living room, and we'll have similar format here, right, in live communication with our audience. If you have any questions or want Don to go up to a certain table or talk about it, you can with us. It's a great opportunity for us to kind of dive into this idea. But I want to bring this full circle. What we do in gaming with what we do in VR download, right? There is a chart that David Heaney, I'm not going to prompt him to throw it up here right now. He'll do it. I can't control David Heaney, but it's a chart that shows the two types of headsets, glasses and headsets. And it says on that chart, the best mixed reality will be from the headsets. It says on that chart how many years ago is that chart now? And it says best mixed reality will come from a headset. Well, we're going to show you the best mixed reality on the pinball arcade, right? And we're going to show you like how it switches from VR to, it goes to another place, and then you're back in your living room, right? You're not going to get that out of the AR HUD glasses. You're not going to get that at a HUD glasses, but you're not even going to get it out of the Dream in the Sky AR glasses that are being shown up on stages. We have to reiterate that over and over and over again. All right, David, let's talk about tariffs.
Sure. I think that what you said is really, really important, and we really want to set these expectations by going into these different types of glasses. Really, really important to just reiterate that we're talking about here doesn't compete with your Quest 3 or Vision Pro. These are a tiny little fixed low resolution HUD in one eye. The other thing we want to say about glasses, and I'm going to say this because we have a comment here from Cognos Square saying X-Real seem better than the new Meta AR smart glasses, is that there's actually a fourth category of glasses that we haven't discussed here that are these display glasses, TV glasses, whatever you want to call them. And X-Real is kind of the leading company there. And the one thing about Xreal I have to keep pointing out is that their marketing images are incredibly misleading because they try to make you think that these things are glasses, and they're not. They don't look like glasses. If you tried to wear these things walking down the street, you would get very strange looks and people would laugh at you because they don't look like glasses. And it's hard to find a marketing image of Xreal that really shows this, but this one kind of hints at it. The problem is that these things from the front are dimensionally kind of glasses, although they're a lot bigger than glasses. But they're actually sitting way in front of your eye, much further out than regular glasses, to the point where they actually, from like a back to front form factor, are much more similar to the kind of thickness of a headset. And so this is very, very obvious in real life. It's one of those things that because your brain, when you see something that is shaped like sunglasses, is kind of trained to expect something that is the size of sunglasses, looking at a 2D image of X-Real glasses really doesn't get this across. And like, it's one of the products that looks most different on a picture than in real life in 3D. Like, there are a lot of products in this industry and otherwise where you see it on your screen, you buy it or you order it or you get one sent to you, and it looks the same as what you saw. And some of them you're like, wow, this looks so much different in real life. Like, people have this thing with clothing as well. The X-Real glasses are the biggest difference of any product I've ever tried of what do they look like in real life versus what do they look like on a picture. And I just need to highlight that. They're great for what they are. They are great for what they are. If you just want to get this kind of medium-sized fixed image of 1080p, you bring around your phone, you can have like, your Netflix or Disney Plus or whatever. That's
Heads
fine.
up Steam Deck and stuff. It's great.
Yeah. Steam Deck is you're absolutely right, Ian. Steam Deck is the perfect device to pair with this because you can use it as a portable TV. But once again, I need to absolutely be clear here. These look nothing like sunglasses in real life. They look, and actually, I'd argue that because they're trying so hard to look like sunglasses, but they don't because of this massive kind of forward movement, forward position relative to your face, it looks worse than if they'd just gone with some sort of like goggles design. It's like an uncanny valley effect, but instead of for human faces, for sunglasses. And like, I would love to see X-Real come out with something that looked more like goggles, because like, there's such a strange effect to me where like I would wear a Vision Pro on a plane because it's clear what it is. Like, it's kind of like a ski mask kind of goggle headset thing. But like, I'm actually almost slightly reluctant to wear these because they look so strange that it's like, I don't know how to explain what I'm saying. It's like, it looks off enough that people pick up on it going like, hang on, what? Like, why are those sunglasses like that? And so I gotta just like, while not saying anything about the quality of the product at all, just say that the perception you get sometimes here that these things are like, sunglasses. And again, these marketing, I can't even find a marketing image that shows it. They're so careful with the depth of field they use for their camera, the lens kind of field of view, all of that it's really hard to show. But just trust me when I say that they don't look like glasses in
You
real
look
life.
like a person who doesn't know how to put sunglasses on.
Yeah. I don't know.
That.
It's like you're holding your sunglasses in front of you, but you're never putting them on. Like, there's almost, when someone's wearing them, you have this strange like sensation, just kind of push them in. It's almost like uncomfortable. Like when you see a mug at the very, very edge of a desk, like where it's slightly off, you just kind of want to go, that's not right. But yeah.
All right. Well, we gotta talk about the tariffs here, David. Why don't you walk us through? I appreciate you taking the effort to explain this to our audience and break down these numbers and what they might mean. And we had a little talk about one of the sentences in your article as we were putting it together of just everyone in the world right now is now wondering whether these tariffs are actually going to come to pass, given the amount of misinformation, re-reporting, disinformation, exaggerations, hysteria in certain levels that gets echoed around certain places. It becomes really, 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 really hard to set your expectations. I think there were some stock market reactions to this almost immediately, and
Not just some.
yeah.
I mean, I have some friends that are like in that, they're traders, etc. And I don't know, I need to check on them. I think I don't think they're having a good day at all.
they have that chat group hasn't been updated in about 24 hours. Do you have their do you have the police or their address to send them to check on them?
Send a care package.
Yeah, right. Yeah. All right.
Yeah. Let's get into this then. Yeah. So if you don't really follow the political news, this is tough. We don't want to go into politics, or at least we don't want to go into party politics. But there are some areas of political policy that do affect this industry, and so we do need to talk about this. We're not taking any political stance for any party. We're just going to talk about the numbers and the economic reality here of what has been announced, and if it happens, what those implications could be. So while I'm sure people will have the urge to get deeply political in the comments, please try to keep it civil, and let's not devolve into, from my perspective as an outsider, the absolute shit show of discourse I see in the US, where it's like, you're not enemy sides in a war. Okay. You're the same country people. You don't need to kill each other. We'll try to keep this civil. So let's get into the details here. So yesterday,
I was silent during Brexit. You get to be silent during this. So we do each other a favor here. Okay.
Yeah. So President Trump has announced that from next week on April 9th, Wednesday, there will now be a 54% tariff. That will be the new tariff position for Chinese-made goods, and a 46% tariff for Vietnam-made goods. And we point out those two countries in our article and in our coverage right now because China and Vietnam are where the vast majority of headsets are made, including Quest and PlayStation VR 2 and Pico, etc. And so these tariffs do not just apply to companies from these countries selling products to you across borders. These even apply to American companies that are making their product in these companies and then in these countries and then importing it to you. So April 9th, Wednesday, is when these take effect. So President Trump has already implemented over the past few months a 20% tariff on Chinese goods. And so this is now increasing to 54%. And some companies, including Meta, had been diversifying their supply chain by moving some production to Vietnam. Meta has had a very large-scale project that we have reported on before to diversify that out to Vietnam. But Vietnam is almost as bad here, with a 40% tariff being applied for production from Vietnam imported to the US. So this, assuming this isn't a bluff or a ploy, because the kind of political thing I'm going to touch on here is that we've seen that the Trump administration has said that it sometimes uses these tariffs more as threats to try and get different countries to enact certain policies that it would like it to do, be it take away their tariffs or some other things. Assuming this goes through, so assuming it isn't just like, Trump will get them to do something and then at the last minute it gets canceled, this would almost certainly lead to price rises in the US for the majority of VR headsets. So analyst estimates put the price to Meta of a Quest 3, including components and production, at around $430. And so then they sell it to you for $500. That means that if these tariffs were to apply, Meta would then be getting the headset for around $650. So unless they're willing to take a massive loss on each headset, which not even Meta is likely willing to do, this would be very, very stupid for Meta to do, and it's very unlikely. They would probably have to increase the price of the headset. So you might see a $700 Quest 3 and a $500 Quest 3S. On Apple's side, they're an example of one of the few companies that we think might potentially absorb this if it happens. So the estimate is that Apple produces each Vision Pro for around $1,700. So with these tariffs, it would be at around $2,500. So they still would be making healthy profit, maybe not an ideal profit for Apple. They like to have huge hardware margins, but it would still be possible that Apple would be willing to absorb that cost for Vision Pro. When it comes to like indie headsets and small headsets, this would be catastrophic. So for Bigscreen Beyond 2, they do assemble final assembly. They don't go into details, but it is some final assembly in the United States. But these tariffs apply to components too, with the exception of semiconductors. So those micro OLED displays coming in, tariffed. All of the other components like lenses, tariffed. And those costs would likely lead to an increase in the price that you pay as a consumer. This would be devastating for our industry. And some people are saying like this is Pico's time to shine. Well, no, like Pico is still like they're getting, like if they wanted to sell in the US, they don't even sell in the US, but they would be tariffed, and this wouldn't apply to US companies selling to other countries, right? So like Meta wouldn't have the cost increase of bringing a Quest from China to Europe, It would only be for US customers. Now, that said, there could be political reasons that this changes, right? Maybe President Trump puts pressure on some companies to say, don't you dare increase your prices only in the US and not in Europe. If you want to increase your prices, you better do it everywhere. I don't know. This is something that is theoretically possible. So it's possible this would affect other countries. But as a direct effect of these tariffs, this would only apply to people buying their headset in the United States, or in Beyond's case, everyone, because they do their assembly in the US. So as long as you're bringing something into the US at some stage of your process, this wouldn't be a thing. Now, one very, very important thing I want to say here is that these companies, all of these headset companies and hardware consumer electronics in general, build up a very large stockpile of product before they sell it. So there are likely hundreds of thousands of Quest headsets already in warehouses in the US. And that's just for normal operations. Perhaps Meta has anticipated this and has brought in millions of Quest headsets. We don't know. But at some point, that stock's going to run out. And they're going to need to bring new headsets in from China and Vietnam. And when they do that, I simply don't see how this tariff would not lead to price increases. Again, assuming it goes through and it isn't some bluff or political ploy or move.
A lot of questions in my head, a lot of ways to take this as we close out the show. I think there's a couple leading questions I wanted to leave our audience with, and I'm going to choose to just focus on one of the questions here with you, David, instead of the broader question that is in the back of my mind. What is holding back robotic production, fully robotic assemblage? So I'm seeing several people point out that like Bigscreen Beyond is assembled in the United States. That's great. Lots of products are assembled in the United States, but all the components are still coming from overseas, and those are the things that are getting taxed, essentially getting added cost to them. So it makes no difference, right? So the question is, how do you go from silicon mined in, from the ground to actually in a consumer product? And right now we have this really, really complex international global network of supply chain that takes things from one hillside to, in one country on ship to a factory in another country. And like you get a product 6 months later through this crazy supply chain and it works, right? And changing up the supply chain requires decades of change in order to like make any meaningful progress. So there's this word austerity that I've heard used in a lot of other countries. I hear it come out of the news out of England a lot. And I feel like that's kind of the theme of a lot of this news that is happening with the United States is like, what does it take to bring manufacturing to the United States? And what are the roadblocks to doing so? Are these two core questions I would love for David to attack, and I'd love for our audience to have in their minds as we move into the future and consider future VR downloads. I'll leave David with the final comment here because we need to get off of here. Come back soon with Pinball FX VR with Don Hopper and I right after this stream.
Sure. So as some of our commenters are pointing out, it's not that you have to do manufacturing in the US. It's that you have to source all of the expensive components and do manufacturing in the US. This isn't just a tariff on final goods. Like it is a tariff on even the components. So you would not only have to do the headset assembly in the US, which Bigscreen does, and Apple did some like Mac Pro assembly in the US back in the day. It was a big thing during the first Trump administration. You would also have to get, in Quest 3's case, the LCDs from the US. In Vision Pro's case, the micro OLED displays that are currently, coming from Sony, and they're probably either China, Taiwan, Japan, Vietnam. All of this has to come back to the United States to avoid this. And that's obviously, from my understanding, one of the potential reasons that the Trump administration wants to do this. They want to say, let's create a short-term pain for a long-term gain where we bring manufacturing back and of everything, not just the final product, but all of the components. The problem is that, as you say, Ian, that is going to take a while. That is going to take a long while. And while, some things can happen faster than others, to get to the point where you're like, this product is somehow still the same price, because right now, the reality is that China and Vietnam still are more efficient than most Western countries at manufacturing, that they can do it for a lower cost. And the crazy part is when it comes to China, and faster. There is this kind of weird thing in the world where some people say, like, they track where their fruit comes from. And they're like, it was picked in this country, and then it was sorted in this country, and then came over to this country for warehousing, and then back to my country. And they're thinking, surely it would be cheaper to just grow them down the street. And in an ideal world, yeah. But somehow these things are done at such scale, right? It is about economies of scale. The more you do things, the larger scale you do something, the lower cost per unit, that it's actually still cheaper. And so not only do you need to do this for the United States, you need to have this supply chain coming out from the US to other countries and be competitive with China. But how do you do that when, like, yes, these tariffs mean that American companies that are producing internally these components get a kind of benefit. The difference of the tariff is how much less efficient they can be and still be the same price. That doesn't apply to the rest of the world, because if you're selling to Europe, they don't have these tariffs on Chinese imports. If you're selling to, South America, unless this was a global thing, that's the difficulty here. And you have to hope that the US market would be big enough. So I don't know how companies are going to navigate this. But like, I just have to say again, this is going to be, and I have to add all the ifs and buts, if this is actually real and does happen and doesn't get pulled at the last moment, if this isn't just Trump's hard negotiation or whatever you want to call it, this is going to be awful for this industry. If we go to a world where we're no longer talking about $300 to $500 headsets, we're talking about $500 to $700 at minimum, and then the smaller companies have to go from their Bigscreen Beyond, and then these are just numbers I'm putting out there to be clear. These aren't any numbers that anyone's announced. Like if a Bigscreen Beyond goes from 1,000 to 1,500 or 2,000, how does that change their market and all the sales velocity we've just talked about? And the worst question, and this is one that I've put to Bigscreen, and I don't expect them to answer this: what about current pre-orders? Because those components probably haven't come in yet. Can you still sell those $1,000 Beyond 2 pre-orders in a world where these tariffs do really happen?
Yeah. This is a great discussion. We will continue it in the future. There's that extra question in the back of my mind I want to get to with you, David. I'll go text James in our audience my question so he can keep the conversation going with me. Come back in about 30 minutes after this stream for Don Hopper and I to get into some pinball here on our channel. So hit the subscribe button for UploadVR.com. For our channel. Go become a member or patron over on UploadVR.com. Henry Stockdale is off. Hopefully he's getting some relaxation, though. He keeps popping into our Slack. I hope he gets some rest out there. We've got I've got the best team in the business covering this news. They're on top of the ball, knowing everything that's happening in every corner. But VR is growing new corners all the time. And so we have to send people off to those new corners and find out what's happening over there. And it's a lot of work. So please, for all of our existing members and patrons, thank you so much for your existing support. Thank you for your time today, tuning in with us, our time travelers, everyone watching us globally. We'll see you in the future.
Thanks, everyone. We'll keep a real close eye on all this, and we'll keep bringing you the latest. Thanks, everyone. Great conversation, and thank you for keeping it civil, as I'm sure for the Americans in the audience, the political tensions are high, but thank you for keeping it civil. We really appreciate that.
Yeah, we'll see you.